In home leagues, we all see some wild stuff. I know I've been in leagues where some of my league mates will just come into the draft having no prep, no research whatsoever, and they just draft players that they think are good because they've been good in years past. Today, we're going to break down my 5 biggest fantasy football busts, 5 players that you should let your buffoon league mates draft in 2023 fantasy football, as well as the players that you should draft instead of them. So it won't just be like, don't draft these players. It'll be in that area of the draft. Who should you be drafting instead? So if you guys enjoyed this video, as always, leave a like down below. Subscribe to the channel if you guys are new around here. Now let's get into it. All right, so last year's video, I had Dalvin Cook, Amari Cooper, Elijah Mitchell, David Montgomery, and Allen Lazard making up this list. Everyone outside of Amari Cooper ended up busting to some degree, so I would say I did okay last year. Amari Cooper obviously proved me wrong, but 4 for 5, not bad. I will say also that everybody in this video was going inside the top like 6-7 rounds of ADP. There's nobody that's going like in round 9 that, you know, if you miss on them, they don't really kill you that much. All of these guys are going high enough that if you miss, it's going to hurt your fantasy football lineup. So we're going to go from 5 to 1, my number 5 bust, all the way to my number 1 bust. Most of these guys are running backs because a lot of this area of the draft is the running back dead zone. And of course, Danny talked about a lot of running backs in his video as well. We're going to start with number 5, who's an older running back from the 2017 running back class, Alvin Kamara, my running back 31, running back 26 in ADP right now. I still can't believe he's going that high, right? Like, we're talking about, you know, home leagues where everybody drafts big names. People are still willing to draft this guy as like a top 6 round player because, you know, he's been very productive in the past. But number 1, the guy's suspended for 3 games, so we can't even use him until week 4. So that should knock him down at least a round or 2, maybe 3 rounds, 4 rounds in ADP. Number 2, there's 2 other very capable running backs on the roster now that were not there last year when Alvin Kamara had such a high snap share, such a high opportunity share. Jamal Williams, who they signed for decent money in free agency. Kendre Miller, who was a prospect I liked coming out of TCU. They drafted in the 3rd round. All of those guys were added this offseason. And third and most important, Alvin Kamara is not the same player that we once saw back in 2017 to 2020. After being a career elite efficiency running back, like we're talking about the first 4 years of this guy's career being some of the most elite efficiency we've ever seen to start an NFL career. So we add that framework for Alvin Kamara. He has since averaged 3.7 and 4.0 yards per carry the last 2 seasons. His career lows in yards per target at 6.6 and 6.4. His lowest missed tackles forced per attempt came last year at 16.4%. He should have been way better than he was last year for fantasy. He led all running backs in snap share. He was top 4 in opportunity share. He had a top 3 target share at the position. And now we have a player who still doesn't have Sean Payton, who obviously was a big contributor to his success, who has shown signs of decline and who is, 27, 28 years old, which in my running back touch and age apex video that I'll link down below, I already talked about how the fact that when running backs start to show a sign of decline, start to fall off, we really, really want to be fading them because that, initial reaction that we have in them lowering their ADP resulted in an 82% hit rate. So when we saw a running back decline 1 year and then he goes a lot lower in ADP the following year, usually that means that that running back is over the hill, and it usually means that they'll likely lose work as the season goes along, especially now that Kamara has all these other running backs to compete with for touches. And you can't even use this guy for 3 weeks. He's suspended for the first 3 weeks of the game. I'm completely baffled on why people are spending a top pick on Alvin Kamara outside of the fact that he's a big name and he's been productive for fantasy in years past. It's not a very good offense. It's not an offense that I'm really, really excited about. Derek Carr comes in, who's like not that much better, if at all, than what Andy Dalton was giving the Saints last year. And Alvin Kamara's workload is going to diminish from where it was last year when he already was a big-time disappointment. So when it comes to where Alvin Kamara is going right now you can get him in like the early 6th round of ADP, which again, I think is absolutely egregious. If you want to go after a running back in that area, you should go after a young running back with the opportunity to potentially ascend in value like J.K. Dobbins, like Dameon Pierce, somebody like that. Or simply, because this is the running back dead zone, draft any other position. Draft Kyle Pitts, draft Dallas Goedert, draft one of these wide receivers. Christian Watson, Drake London, Mike Williams, Tyler Lockett, Chris Godwin, Brandon Ayuk, all these guys going in this area where Alvin Kamara is somehow going. At quarterback, you can probably get Trevor Lawrence or, Justin Herbert if they're falling, or even Deshaun Watson at that point in the draft. So definitely do not draft Alvin Kamara, especially in the 6th round. If he falls to round 8, round 9, it's a little bit of a different story, but even still, the fact that he's suspended for 3 games makes me just not want to draft him altogether. So Number 4 on this list is Alexander Mattison, who right now for me is RB24 in my rankings. RB19 is where he's actually going. In my opinion, this is the definition of a dead zone running back. For me, a dead zone running back is often a running back who is being propped up by a projectable workload, being propped up potentially by their situation, which both of which are true for Alexander Mattison. And usually this running back isn't talented enough to hold that workload or isn't talented enough to warrant going as high as they're going, which is absolutely true of Alexander Mattison. Typically, if a running back hasn't broken out by year 4, year 5 of their career, it isn't likely to happen. So even though, you can make the excuse that Alexander Mattison had Dalvin Cook in front of him on the depth chart, and it's not his fault that he didn't break out. Again, if he was a good enough player, he would have done what Tony Pollard did last year, which is eat into Dalvin Cook's workload as the season went along, start to take over the backfield, but he's not that good of a player. He's averaged 3.8 and 3.7 yards per carry the last 2 seasons behind Dalvin Cook. Yards per touch numbers of 4.3 and 4.2, which are absolutely abysmal. So he's not a talented receiver either. Running backs who haven't broken out by year 5 usually don't. And that's just a stone cold fact. When you look at the running backs that haven't broken out at that point in their career, yeah, they might have some spot starts here and there where they're productive like we've seen from Alexander Mattison. But even though running back is an opportunity-based position, I expect Mattison to lose work as the season goes along because he's not very efficient. This is a pass-first team. They're going to run their offense through Kirk Cousins, Justin Jefferson, TJ Hawkinson, and Jordan Addison. And they have other capable guys on the ground like Ty Chandler. They just signed Myles Gaskin in free agency. The thesis of taking Alexander Mattison, if you guys are high on him, is that he has like maybe this year's Miles Sanders appeal where, to be honest, even though Miles Sanders isn't that good of a running back, he was in a really good offense where that reward was, a top 24 running back in points per game at like an outside the dead zone running back price tag. But where Alexander Mattison is going is not outside the dead zone. He's going in the 5th, 6th round. And if the reward is like barely a top 24 running back like Miles Sanders was last year, I'm probably not going to be investing high draft capital into Alexander Mattison. If he falls in your league to like round 7, round 8, round 9, I'm definitely fine with him at that point. But the price point is my issue with Alexander Mattison because he's not a very talented running back. He's being propped up completely by projectable volume, by situation. And usually when that happens, it means the running back's not very good. And that projectable volume and situation doesn't last the whole season. It maybe goes on for the first week or 2, and then they start to lose work to the other backs in their backfield. The other team signs somebody. Whatever the case is, he could be inefficient and still punch in 10 touchdowns and make me look a little stupid for this take and be this year's Miles Sanders. But I think Mattison can miss for a number of reasons. So for me, I would rather just avoid that risk. I'd rather draft a quarterback, wide receiver, or tight end in this area, like, Mike Williams, Tyler Lockett, Chris Godwin, Brandon Ayuk, Evan Ingram, Deshaun Watson, Mike Evans, DeAndre Swift, Javonte Williams, Deontay Johnson, or Isaiah Pacheco. I would much rather have all of those guys than Alexander Mattison, especially if you guys are in this area of the draft looking for a running back. You're much better off taking a shot on a young running back, an ascending running back who could take a step forward in their career, like an Isaiah Pacheco or like a Javonte Williams, like a Dameon Pierce, like a DeAndre Swift, like a Rashad White, somebody like that. I am not drafting Alexander Mattison unless he falls outside of the running back dead zone, which would be about round 7, round 8 for me in my rankings. So number 3 on this list, and people are not going to like this one, I'm going to go with Derrick Henry, who obviously is going very high in drafts right now. He is RB9 in my rankings, RB7 in ADP. His overall ADP in terms of all positions is like a top 20 pick. And in some league formats, ESPN and Yahoo, he's going in the first round. Like he's going at the 10, 11, 12 spot in those formats. So I know people are going to be really mad about this one. I think Derrick Henry, full disclosure, is a very solid running back option for volume. And of course, because he's a superstar Hall of Fame caliber talent, or at least he was, he could make me look very stupid if he still got it for saying to fade him, which I'm not really saying. I'm just saying that I don't like his price point. Derrick Henry, I would rather draft the options at running back going around him or at wide receiver and quarterback where he currently goes, especially in home league formats where Derrick Henry is this huge name. He's been so productive for so many years, and he hasn't really shown any signs of decline yet. Henry will be steamed up to like a late first round pick, high-end second round pick in those type of league formats, which I'm sure you guys are playing in listening to this. I simply can't take Derrick Henry in PPR and half PPR formats over CeeDee Lamb, over A.J. Brown, over Josh Jacobs, over Tony Pollard, over Garrett Wilson, over Amon-Ra St. Brown, over Devontae Adams, over any of the top 3 quarterbacks, Mahomes, Josh Allen, or Jalen Hurts in PPR and half PPR formats. So once we account for all the guys going in the first round, all the players I just said, we're talking about Derrick Henry as like a 2-3 turn pick, which is exactly where I think he should be going. The risks are these with Derrick Henry. even though he's a Hall of Fame caliber talent, even though he gets like a huge workload, I expect this offense to still be the slowest paced offense in the NFL. They were last year and they probably will be again. One of the lower scoring offenses in the NFL, and the Titans offensive line entering this season was ranked number 32 in the NFL according to PFF and established the run. So we're talking about an offensive line that no longer can get the push that Derrick Henry had at the prime of his career. And those are all the situational risk with Derrick Henry, because we also have Henry the player, who is, obviously still quite efficient last year and he's still quite good last year, but we did get a glimpse of what it would be like if Derrick Henry fell off. There was a 2-week period at the beginning of the season where Derrick Henry was going for nothing on the trade market because people thought he was washed. He's nearly 30 years old and at 1,900 career touches. The typical fall off for elite running backs, as I discussed in that running back age and touch Apex video, is 27 years old and 1,150 career touches. So even though he's already beaten those marks, it's possible that we see him kind of start to deteriorate as he gets to the later portion of his career. Man, the guy's almost 30 years old and he has almost 2,000 touches. Eventually, Father Time is undefeated and they're going to get Derrick Henry. He is going into year 8 of his career, which typically has been the biggest drop-off from year 7 to year 8, as we've seen in this running back fantasy performance by age study that Ryan Heath did for Fantasy Points. Maybe Henry's simply built different. He's a future Hall of Famer, potentially. He could prove me wrong yet again, but his elite upside is capped. So even if he is better than I'm thinking he's going to be, I'd imagine he's probably at best case scenario like RB4, RB5, RB6 in points per game. My draft philosophy is very risk averse at the running back position in the early rounds, unless they have a high ceiling like, Bijan Robinson has, Tony Pollard has, Nick Chubb has, some of those guys this year. I'm probably not likely to draft those players in the early rounds, especially when they have all these compounding risk factors like Derrick Henry does. So I know I'm going to get flamed in the comments for this one. People are going to be like, how the hell could you fade Derrick Henry? Keep fading the king. You're such an idiot. Whatever. But again, this is a price-related fade. I'm not necessarily fading him overall. I have gotten some shares here and there on underdog when he falls, but I have him ranked at the 2-3 turn. In ESPN and Yahoo ADP, he's going in the first round still. He's going in the early second round still, and I would imagine in a lot of your work leagues, a lot of your friends and family leagues, he's going to go that high as well, and I just simply can't take him over the other options, the young receivers, the younger running backs that project better than Derrick Henry. So number 2 on this list is Miles Sanders. Again, another dead zone running back 26 for me in my rankings, running back 20 right now in ADP. If Alexander Mattison isn't the prototype dead zone back, then it's definitely Miles Sanders this year. The only running back who managed to get an actual contract, it's kind of surprising that of all the running backs to get paid, it was Miles Sanders this offseason. But good God, where do I start with Miles Sanders? Miles Sanders had a good year last year. Don't get me wrong. He had 1,300 total yards. He had 11 touchdowns. But here's the thing. Despite that, he only finishes the RB21 in points per game with 12.8 PPR points per game. So even though he returned on his ADP because he was going in like the 6th, 7th round, 8th round of drafts, he was still like a replacement level RB2. And let me remind you that he played for the number 1 scoring offense in the NFL last year in the Philadelphia Eagles, a team that made the Super Bowl behind the best offensive line in the league with elite weapons around him, A.J. Brown, Devontae Smith, and Dallas Goedert to draw away attention, and also a quarterback who's mobile, who is opening up the box for him, and the 4th most red zone touches in the NFL. So Miles Sanders pretty much had the best case scenario for a situation last year, and now he goes to a situation where he's no longer on, the best offense in the league and with a great offensive line. The Eagles just 2 years ago were not the best offense in the league, right? Jalen Hurts was a first-year starter. He finished as RB32 in points per game that year and didn't score a single touchdown. He was left for dead in fantasy football drafts last year for this reason, because we didn't think Miles Sanders was very good. So the argument I'm sure you guys are going to make in favor of Miles Sanders, if you guys like him, is that he's going to get all the volume in Carolina. They paid him. They're going to increase his receiving workload, yada, yada, yada. As I discussed with Pat Kerrane in the legendary running backs video last week, it is extremely rare for running backs to see increased receiving workloads and that prop up their price tag, which is what's happening with Miles Sanders, if they aren't rookies or second-year running backs. Usually we only see young running backs take a big step forward in terms of overall receiving work. If it's year 5 of somebody's career, year 6 of somebody's career, like it is for Miles Sanders, he's 26 years old, he's not likely going to see a massive uptick in receiving work, especially when we consider the fact that that guy's been absolute trash in the passing game. 3.9 yards per reception last year, again, on one of the best offenses in the league. Under 5 yards per target the last 3 seasons in each of them. When someone stinks at catching the ball, they don't get rewarded with more pass catching work. It's just common sense. I I love Bryce Young, but he is a rookie quarterback, so he's not going to do what Jalen Hurts did last year. A shaky offensive line is not the Eagles' offensive line that Sanders was playing behind last year. They have minimal other weapons on offense to draw attention away. The absolute ceiling for Miles Sanders, assuming he gets a little bit more work than he saw last year, especially as a receiver, is like a back-end RB2, high-end RB3 type of performance, which I'm more than fine missing out on. I didn't even mention the fact that Miles Sanders has also missed 10 games in the 2 seasons previous to last year. So he played 17 games last year. Before that, he was injury prone. He was a guy that couldn't stay healthy. Do not draft Miles Sanders. There's so many other risk factors involved with his profile. If you guys are a running back bro and you need yourself a running back in round 5 or 6, you should be drafting Dameon Pierce, Kenneth Walker, or J.K. Dobbins, or make sure you get your running backs early, get 1 or 2 in the first couple rounds to make sure that you avoid this running back dead zone. Or simply, you just draft all the value at wide receiver, quarterback, and tight end in this range, because you can get Keenan Allen, George Kittle, Justin Fields, Justin Herbert, DJ Moore, Darren Waller, Trevor Lawrence, Terry McLaurin, Jerry Jeudy. All those guys are going in this area of the draft, and Miles Sanders is just simply way too overvalued at this area of the draft. So finally, we get into my number one bust for 2023 fantasy football. The last couple years, my number one bust was Clyde Edwards-Helaire 2 years ago, Dalvin Cook last year, and DeAndre Hopkins now this year. Wide receiver 31 in my rankings, wide receiver 23 in ADP right now. Hopkins is another one of these guys like Derrick Henry, where if he still got it, he could make me look stupid. And it's funny because they both play for the same team, and they both are kind of correlated, because if Hopkins still has it, there's a good chance that Derrick Henry gets more scoring chances. So I'm either going to hit big on this take and not draft either of these Tennessee Titans, or I'm going to miss big on this take, and both of them are going to burn me pretty hard. But the way I look at Hopkins is this. He was cut by the Arizona Cardinals early on in the offseason. He sat out there in free agency. He had offers from the Buffalo Bills, the New England Patriots, Kansas City Chiefs. All those teams were reportedly in on DeAndre Hopkins. But before signing with the Titans, there were reports that the Buffalo Bills didn't want to pay up for DeAndre Hopkins because they believed he had lost a step. And same goes with Kansas City. They would have had no issues meeting his demands salary-wise at $12 million, which is what he got from the Titans, if they didn't think he was washed to some degree. So the data suggests also that year 10 is the biggest fall-off for wide receivers. So I talked about the fall-off for running backs already, being like 1,150 career touches, 27 years old, which typically happens around year 6, year 7 of a running back's career if they've formerly been an elite running back. With wide receivers, it's about year 10. That's the biggest percentage drop-off that we see, which is the season that DeAndre Hopkins as well as Keenan Allen are in this year. He posted his lowest yards per reception of his career last year, lowest PFF receiving grade since his rookie season, yards after catch per reception also lowest since his rookie season in 2013. He was sub 2 yards per route run for the second straight year after being over 2 yards per route run for 6 of the previous 7 years from 2014 to 2020. So it's very clear to me that DeAndre Hopkins is at least a little bit washed at this point in his career. His reception perception marks are still pretty solid, and his game could age well if they move him into the slot or whatever the case is. But with the 32nd ranked passing offense in the NFL in terms of pace of play and overall pass to run splits last year in neutral game scripts, why would I want to invest in DeAndre Hopkins, who I don't know if he's still elite? I don't think this offense is going to elevate him. And also, there's some young players there, Traylon Burks and Chigakonkwo, that could eat into his target share. So for me, I just don't want DeAndre Hopkins on my team. The other major factor with DeAndre Hopkins is that his name is DeAndre Hopkins. DeAndre Hopkins has been an elite fantasy receiver since I was in the 11th grade. This guy is legitimately a very, very good receiver, and he has been for a long time. So a lot of people are going to overvalue him in name value during your draft. It'd be different if his price point was like a 6th, 7th rounder, and some of that cost of the fact that he could fall off and the fact that he's in a run-heavy offense was baked in. But you still got to spend a early 5th, late 4th round pick on this guy. And I'm getting shades of, Allen Robinson last year, Julio Jones when he was with Tennessee, Larry Fitzgerald towards the end of his career. Things can change very quickly in the NFL. It's called the not-for-long league for a while. And my philosophy at wide receiver, at running back, any skill position is that I would rather be a year too early if I sense that somebody has fallen off. Because if Hopkins burns me, I don't think he'll end up being a wide receiver 1 in fantasy. I think we're talking absolute ceiling range of outcomes. He's a top 20 receiver on the back of a lot of target volume. And with these big named guys, your league mates are going to overvalue them. They're going to take them higher because they know who they are. They trust them. They view them as safe players. So I doubt you'd be staring them down in the middle of the 6th round because they fell at a value to you. You're probably talking about guys that are going to go in the mid 4th round or whatever of your fantasy draft. So DeAndre Hopkins, my number one bust of this year. Tell me down below in the comments what you thought. Who is your biggest bust this year in fantasy? Again, remember, keep it in the first couple rounds. Most of the guys that I talked about on this list were like high risk, low reward type of players, which is not the archetype that we usually want. If you're going to take a risk on a player, you want them to at least have elite upside. And in my estimation, none of these guys do, which is why when you really break it down, there's no reason to really be in on them. All of these guys have a price point where I'm comfortable taking them. So I don't hate these players. I don't think I would never draft them. It's just that price point where I'm comfortable taking them is not where they're currently going. And especially in home leagues, they're probably going to go higher than even the ADPs that I suggested here. So just because they're busts, quote unquote, or fades, quote unquote, doesn't mean that I would completely never draft these players. I just think that the other players going around them are better values, and that's why I am not spending a lot of draft picks on these players. So if you guys enjoyed, leave a like, subscribe to the channel if you are new. If you guys want access to our rankings, if you want access to this like FSC consensus versus home league ADPs that you saw throughout this video, you can get it by going to Underdog Fantasy and depositing just $10. You'll get our redraft guide for free, as well as our weekly rankings in season to help you guys out with your start-sit decisions throughout the year. That is available to you with just a $10 deposit using the promo code FSE on Underdog Fantasy. When you do that, within a couple hours, you'll get an email access to both of those things. So if that interests you, link will be down below in the pinned comment. And of course, if you can't play Underdog where you live, or if you already have an account, you can get our site draft guide as well as our weekly rankings on flockfantasy.com and use the promo code FSE when you sign up for either a monthly or an annual package over there for 30% off. If you sign up for an annual package, you get 6 months for free. It'll cover you all the way until next draft season. But with that being said, peace out, and we'll talk to you soon.